Hey there, welcome. My name's Luke McLean, and you're listening to the Luke McLean Life Podcast. And this is our first episode, so it's really exciting for me to. I've done podcasts before. I've got more of an interview-based podcast with conscious conversations, which has been incredible. But this particular podcast is a much more focused podcast around the work that I do as a coach in working with dads and parenting, and in all the aspects of being a dad and the juggle that we have between our personal lives, being a parent, being a partner, and then professionally. We have a lot of balls in the air, and it's incredible, but it's also really challenging to be at our best, in all these moments on all these different levels all the time. And often that the stress and the challenges come at the cost of us. And that's the work that I'm doing as a coach, is to really support dads to invest in themselves, to be their best so they can be their best for others. So that's the work that I do. And if you want to check more of that out, it's at lukemclean.net, and there's one-on-one coaching, there's men's or dad's group coaching, and there's a bunch of free resources there. So I'm an Australian, as you'd know by the accent. This is really tailored for the everyday Aussie dad. A really practical and simple way to create and sustain change. So it's really cool, and I love doing it. It's a new project or a new avenue I'm going down after over a decade of coaching wellness, coaching mindfulness, and coaching leaders and culture, to really funnel that into dads. I'm a father of 5 myself, so I'm well versed in this. I'm by no means the expert in terms of, I don't have any troubles. My parenting's perfect. It's far from that. So I'm climbing the rock face with you guys, but I think I've got some nuggets and some real insights and some experience to help guide and grow. So in saying that, that's what I'm about, and you're going to hear a lot about that through this podcast. And the Luke McLean Life Podcast is an extension of that. It's a chance every week to sort of just turn that off. It's a chance every week to really talk to you guys about areas and focuses of growth, of change, of where we might go wrong, because we get so busy doing in life that sometimes we forget about the being, and that's the really important part. Today, we're going to delve into relationships, and relationship/connection is the starting point for everything I do with a client. And when I talk, we want to build, firstly, connection. Connection to what? Connection to us. Connection to who we are. I look at it like a car. When the car's broken or when the car's going well, we say when we drive, if we know very little about the car, we just say the car's broken. We don't know what's broken. We just know it's broken. This is us as dads, as men, when we're feeling challenged or struggled, is we're not at our best. We've got behaviors, we've got habits, we've got stories, we've got reactions and responses that aren't where we would like them to be. Something's not quite there. The car's broken. So what we do is then we've got awareness. Self-awareness is awareness when the car's not running well. When we're not, before the car conks out, before we really react, respond, and we just flip our lid or whatever you want to call it, there's an awareness that we're missing some things. We might be not going to the gym. We might be drinking more than we want. We might not be as invested in our relationships. We might not have as much time as we want, and we're feeling the stress. There's an awareness that there's something wrong. We're not at our best. Self-awareness allows us the potential to self-regulate and change once we've got awareness. So the car scenario is a nice one, where there's awareness that there's something wrong with the car. We can hear it, we can feel it, we know a little bit more about cars, so we're aware. Before it gets too bad, before it conks out, we can take it to the mechanic and we can get it fixed. We can fix it ourselves. And then you go another level down from there, and then there's self-understanding. So self-understanding is understanding what we need to be at our best, what's really important, what's essential. There's a deep understanding of our inner workings, of self-regulation, self-awareness, self-care, and we really know ourselves. I call this inner work, and it's very important, and it's very underutilized, that because we're so busy driving that car, just doing, that we don't spend the time to invest in how it works, how it runs, what it needs to run really well, and what are all the makeups of it. So when we got self understanding, we actually understand how the car works. We understand what puts it together, how the engine works. We've got a much more nuanced understanding of the car or of ourselves. And that's where I like to get to with the clients. And why this is important is because we bring ourselves to every single relationship, every single moment, every single action. We are going to be there. It's important to understand that we show up everywhere. And it's often not the environment, the problem that's the problem. It's our reaction or response to that problem that creates it as a problem in our heads, that story. So I hope you can understand how important our relationship with ourselves as a starting point is. This is where I was getting to, the relationship with us. The relationship firstly with our stories, our beliefs, where they come from, how they shape us. We call this conditioning, how we've been conditioned. And there's nothing wrong or right. It's not a judgment on how we perceive the world, but we just want to know where it comes from. Once we do that, we can choose our response and our beliefs more so as to which ones we'll give energy to and invest in, and which ones actually we feel like, you know what, they're not serving us as we want anymore. We've got this belief, but actually that's a belief that's held me back. That's a belief around fear. That's a belief that doesn't connect to my values. I'm going to reshape and reinvent that belief, and I'm not going to invest the energy in that anymore. And when it comes up, I'm going to manage it much better. So that's the important one, is the inner work of this, of understanding that. Once we sort of get an idea of our beliefs, our stories, and we're comfortable with them, we start to then combine that with what our values are and our connection to. Again, this is still a connection to us, a relationships with self, but knowing what are our values, what's our guiding light, what's our beacon that we want to make decisions from, take action from, live from. That's why our values are important. Values, and we'll talk more about this in another episode, but values are so good and so needed, but they're only as good as they're used, and they're only as good as we allow them to guide us. If we don't do anything with them, they're useless. It's like any tool. I see values almost as a tool, or as a tool. Tools are essential, and I'll talk about this more later. Tools are essential. If you want to build a house, you need tools. If you want to, use your computer, you need tools to use that computer. You need software. They're tools and resources. They're all really important, but they're only useful if they're being used and used in the right way. So if you've got all these tools, all these resources, all these things available to us, but we do not use them or use them in the right way, they are useless, or sometimes not even just useless, damaging. Point in case is our phones. We'll talk about that again in a later episode, but our relationship to our phone can be deeply useful, deeply impactful, deeply life-changing, or it can be deeply damaging, deeply addictive, and deeply distracting, depending on that tool and how we use it. So this is really important to understand in our relationships, how we show up and how we're going to use those tools and resources that we've got available to us. And again, you want to connect is our relationship to our phones, our relationship to our food, a relationship to movement and exercise, are all a relationship to ourself. And these are important relationships to understand how we show up, how we invest in them, what's the story we tell about them, and are they where they want to be? And a really great exercise, which I'll share with you in the show notes in the tools, is a simplest practice that I think so important is in one box, put a relationship you've got. It could be a relationship with food. It could be a relationship with your wife, your work. What's the story I'm telling you about this relationship right now? Where am I in this relationship right now? And how am I showing up through actions and behaviors right now? So identify and get a really clear understanding of the current state of play in that particular relationship. And then in the second box, you sort of put down, where do you want that relationship to be? What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to feel like? What would you like the language, the actions, the behaviors to be when that relationship is flourishing? And you get super clear on that. And then you identify, where am I now? Where would I like to be? What's the gap? And the gap is the opportunity for action and change. And then you start to identify the steps. This is what I would do with clients: identify the steps, the actions that you can start to begin to take to close the gap. The idea is wanting to close the gap. What's essential is clarity on where you are now and where you want to go. This is often where people get stuck, is they're not sure where they actually are. They don't want to identify it. They don't want to dig in and do that work. And they're not super clear on what success looks like. So they're not really that clear on the gap. Therefore, if you've got a fuzzy idea of what you want, you won't have the energy or the want to move forward on it. So that for me is really critical, in that relationship to self. So think about what would be the 3, 4, maybe 5 key relationships to self. For me, it's a relationship to the stories that I'm telling. I'll really connect to that one. I'll connect to a relationship to my body, which will include my exercise and my food and what I'm consuming. The third relationship is to my family. And the fourth one would be my relationship to work. Fifth one to my community, including my church. And I'd have a sixth one, which is a bit different, is a relationship to nature, which I love nature. And these are relationships that are deeply important to me. Again, my relationship with me is central to all the rest. And I need to look after myself and be in my best shape physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally in order to bring my best to those other relationships and connections. And then I identify in line what are the next ones, or the ones that I'm under-investing in or over-investing in right now, and what's needed. And that could be on a week-to-week basis in terms of, what's going on in my family life, personally, what's going on in work. Have I got a golf trip, or am I hanging with the boys this week? There's going to be an investment in friendships, community. That's cool. It's understanding it, but you want to have a bit of a balance around it, and not just have a huge overinvestment in work. Because if you've got a huge overinvestment in work week after week, day after day, there's an underinvestment in those other relationships somewhere. It's the old wheel of life. If something's overinvested, something's underinvested. We won't always have balance, but over a longer period of time of, say, a year, you want to have some balance. So I hope that makes sense, is to understand the most important relationships. And what do you want those relationships to actually really look like? Do you want them to change and grow? Do you want them to sustain and maintain? And I really even get into the detail of the language. You might be with your mates and chatting, and you might talk about footy, weather, work. It's a real surface level conversation, and that might be fine. But you've got to look at that relationship and go, is that an investment that is still where it needs to be? Or would I like to invest more and add more depth into that relationship that might be around care, service, support, actually opening up to how you're feeling? Is that a person that you want to grow that relationship with? Because I think with dads especially, we can just have a whole bunch of surface relationships, real transactional, where you'll just talk about your footy team, you'll talk about the weather, a bit about work. And the reality is that in that relationship, you don't open up, you've got the armor on, it's pretty baseline. He's got the armor on, it's pretty baseline. And there's no compatibility for depth in that conversation or even in that relationship. It's okay to have some of them, I reckon, but you want to have some support with some depth. The ability for you to support someone and someone to support you, and to be able to have regular connections and conversations about how you're feeling, what are your goals, what are you going after. And this is the work I do in the men's support groups. Is we create safe spaces and frameworks to dig into those areas and topics of life, because men have been doing this for thousands of years. And I think it's dropped off. And I think that's some of the reasons why we're feeling so challenged at the moment, is we don't have outlets to explore and experience life and connect to more men who can help. And that's an important relationship that we need. So I hope this little bit on relationships has been helpful. The takeaways from this are our relationships are central to our life. If you want to write that down, the quality and depth of the relationships you have is and will be the quality and depth of the life you will have. So relationships are central. The most central relationship, which we've discussed, is the relationship you have with yourself. There's a beautiful Crowded House song that says, "Everywhere you go, you always take the weather with you." And that's us. So understanding that relationship. What even then, going down a line of what aspects of the relationship with self do you want to focus on? We spoke about that in terms of the stories we tell, our values, our body, those probably key things: what we eat, what we consume, what are we bringing into our consciousness? That's a really big one. What are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you reading? Your relationship, again, we'll cover this later, your relationship should have diversity. Some relationships should challenge you. You should be challenged in relationships, and you should be, out of your comfort zone more regularly. You move that body, you train, you should be pushing it at times. You should be doing things differently, not just staying comfortable. They're huge growers for us. So we start to look at that, start to understand the investment that you're making in your most important relationships, and which ones do you feel right now that you're over-investing in time and energy, ones that you're under-investing in, and start to look at what are the actions, behaviors you want to take. And then the third tool, which will be sent in this email, is identifying those relationships, getting as clear on where they are right now. What's your relationship to your well-being like right now, through your beliefs around it, your actions, your behaviors, your environments, and your experiences. Get really clear on where is it now, where would you like it to be, identify the gap, and start to build practical steps and actions to close the gap. That's also what we spoke about. So I hope there's some useful takeaways when we think about relationships, we think about taking action. And this is a good starting point for you as a dad or as a person, in all aspects of life, leadership, family. This is applicable in all of these areas. It's not isolated to one. That's all I've got. Again, if you would like to check out more of what I do and what I'm about, it's at lukemclean.net. On my Instagram, it's Luke McLean Life, Luke McLean Luke McLean Life. So confusing. So that's what it is. If you want to hear a little bit about me, I'll do that in an upcoming podcast, and that'll be really cool. So I hope you like that. Take care, and we'll talk soon. Bye.